All right, next guest going to be at Helium Comedy Club tonight and tomorrow. We love having him on. He's been on many times. Please welcome Ted Alexandro.
Oh, guys, I was listening closely to the traffic report because I'm going to be on the road shortly, so I had to, take notes and make sure I'm avoiding any dust-ups.
Of course.
Have you heard, and Preston was talking about it earlier this week, that because of the shifting work from home sort of atmosphere and also people just returning back in a hybrid way, that the morning and evening rushes are maybe less congested but extending longer?
I have heard that. I asked Helium if I could Zoom my shows in. I thought it might help with the traffic, trying to do my part, but they said no, they prefer that I come in person.
It's funny for a while, though. Listen, and the last thing we want to do is go back to the beginning of this and, hey, the nostalgic wonder that was the beginning of the pandemic. But did you, in fact, end up doing some Zoom shows and stuff like that?
Well, weirdly, I just prior to the pandemic, and this is purely coincidental, I took, just on a whim, I took a gig at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Oh, yeah?
No kidding.
Yeah, it had always been a hobby of mine. So this was like 2018.
Right.
I just wanted to kind of get in there, get my hands dirty, and I coupled it. As comedians often do, I piggybacked it with a gig at the Chuckle Hut in Wuhan.
So Wuhan and the Chuckle
Hut. It all
Hut.
worked out. Yeah, everything worked out. And then, but next thing I knew, things kind of got out of hand. I was asked to leave both the gig and the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Wow.
So I'm back, and here we are.
Was that going to be your thing? You were the virology
I was going to be the virology comedian. Yeah, I thought this is really kind of an untapped area. This could be my niche. And let's face it, people need to laugh more than ever. So that was my case that I made to the Chuckle Hut. I'm like, this is really the time you guys need me. But
you're right.
They saw it differently. So I'm back. Which it's all for the best because here I am. I'll be at Philly this weekend.
Yeah. So obviously you know the trends before they're happening. So in the world of virology, are you like an influencer?
Well, that can be a blessing and a curse. Yeah, I am a bit of an influencer. If you follow not my comedy page on Instagram, but my virology page, you have to look for that. That's Teddy Wuhan.
Teddy W.
Yeah, and you'll see a lot of trends, at least 2 to 3 weeks before the rest of the world is hip to it. My Instagram page will tip you off to that.
I don't know how you find the time. I mean, as a working comedian with...
I've got 2 babies now, two little viruses, we refer to them as. I've got my hands full. But thank you for acknowledging that. But I also try to make time for the greater good. It's not just about me and my family. It's about how can I help the world?
You can't take and take and take, and that's you got to give back sometimes. And you are a giver. So obviously we have a guest on. We want to do some research, and I'm reading through these things, and did various interviews with you. And I don't know if this is true or this is one of those things that happens to end up in your information. Did you, in fact, open for Chuck Berry one time doing a show?
That was not in Wuhan. That was in St. Louis.
Really?
Chuck's hometown. Yeah. I mean, this is one of those gigs. Isn't it nuts? You get so many gigs as a comedian that you really don't deserve, especially when you're coming up. I think it's because you're cheap and these big acts want somebody to kind of just throw to the wolves to warm the crowd up. So it was a dental convention of all things.
You're a musician, so you're a trained musician. To open for Chuck Berry, even at a dental convention, had to be pretty astonishing.
Well, I had dabbled in dentistry. I have an Instagram page. You can check that out.
Next to the virology.
It's Teddy Novocaine. Yeah. And somehow I got paired with Chuck Berry. I couldn't have been more than 30 years old, but it was amazing, man. In all seriousness, it was amazing to watch him work. He must have been probably close to 80 at that point and just fit as could be and still doing the duck walk and put on a great show. And what was really sweet was his wife sat in the wings and watched the show. So Ted, I was like, aren't you tired of this crap?
Yeah, right. I'm originally from the St. Louis area. Do you remember what venue it was that you played?
Oh, gosh, I don't honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
He had his own hotel and restaurant that he would film people in the bathroom while they were.
Well, there's always a nuance.
Curious.
Well, yeah, maybe I can get a hold of my tape then. If he
Somewhere in the archives.
God, that'd be
Teddy Novocaine.
That'd be a keeper.
yeah. It's like when you go to Six Flags, they get you on the rides.
Ted, you were actually the first legitimate stand-up comedian I ever saw. It was at this. I don't even know if the venue still exists, but it was in Northeast Philly. It was off the Boulevard. It was this sort of bar that was attached to a hotel. And I remember two things about it. The venue was a piece of crap, but you were hilarious. And so I've always loved going to see stand-up comedians since then. But I wanted to ask you, outside of that venue and the Wuhan Chuckle Hut, what's the worst venue you've ever had to play over the years?
Oh man, there've been so many. Basically the ones that come to mind are any type of bar or restaurant where people are unaware that there will be a show that night.
Right.
And that was probably the first half of my career. It's kind of like guerrilla comedy where sometimes I don't even think the owner knows. I think just the producers put it together. There's a game on, like the Super Bowl, perhaps. It could even be like that type of thing. They're like, we're going to market for the people who aren't interested in the Super Bowl. So yeah, I've done gigs where the television there's a big game, not necessarily the Super Bowl, but maybe something like the Final Four. And
yes.
Like, there's no way. Why are we doing this show? And I'm trying to do my bits about virology, which are hard enough even under the best of circumstances.
Yeah. Before it became popular to talk about, you are so right. I had a brief, I had maybe a decade run, where I was serious about doing comedy. You are so right. You would show up at a place and it'd be the assistant manager, and no one would even know who booked the show. And you're like, oh, my God.
I'm sure if you hear the words, somebody say, oh, there's a comedian here.
It's the worst.
The worst thing is when they ask you on the way in, hey, are you interested in a comedy show? I'm like, I am the comedy show.
Right.
I've had that happen. Even after I had been doing it 20, 25 years,
right.
Walking into the stand, because they hire some young kid. I'm not blaming the kid, though I did have him fired.
But you didn't blame him.
Yeah, no blame. But he's asking me hey, do you like comedy? I'm like, well, I'm kind of on the fence, but I'm about to do a show.
I would love to see you just show up and pretend at a bar like you had been booked and see if they even know, oh, I didn't know that was tonight, and then just hop up on stage. I mean, now as a seasoned veteran, try your chops at the ground round.
But those battle scars are things that they are. It's kind of cool to have that in your history, because everyone we've talked. Obviously, we have a number of comedians on the show, and there is that certain thing that you guys, understand that is just the shorthand of the comedy condo. Or, I mean, one of the stories from my past, and I kid you not, it was at a college in Louisiana, and they literally handed me one of those megaphones, like an old standard,
non-powered,
cone to do the show. And
how'd that go?
Have you heard about electricity?
You were like a bare knuckle boxing?
Yes.
Round one.
Oh my, I was Al Jolson.
Yes, it's crazy. Yeah, like you say though, those are truly the gigs that make you a comedian. You have to kind of run the gauntlet of all those kind of crazy gigs to come on the other side. But yeah, there's so many of those. I mean, I've done plenty of college gigs where there's a podium in the middle with no microphone, nothing to amplify. Am I giving a PowerPoint? Why am I a preacher? What is? Do you guys not know how? Have you ever watched a comedy special? How many people did Chris Rock have a podium? What is?
Right.
I didn't bring any notes.
Right.
It's insane. Yeah. So there's so many of those gigs that ultimately they make for a good story, but they're painful as you go through them.
Sure.
All right, a couple things I want to ask you about. First of all, I want to ask you about your beard because it looks great. And when I first met you, you might have had some scruff, maybe a 5 o'clock shadow, but now you have a full-on beard and it totally works for you. How long you been working on that thing?
I guess probably the last 5 years or so I've had a beard, but like the pandemic has really afforded me the opportunity to play with length, girth. It's kind of my hobby, you know, like I'm constantly checking either my Wordle or my beard. You know, those are the two things that I
Did a growth spurt occur right after you left the Wuhan Chuckle Hut?
Yeah, there was an odd spurt, inexplicable, really. That it grew about a foot in a week. But yeah, we'll never know the reasons, really.
You mentioned Wordle, and that is consuming. Like a lot of people on the show here, it's just my wife is addicted. Are you in fact a daily player?
Yeah, I'm a Wordle head. I play, you know, my kids, you know, once they're 2 and 10 months. So once they are sufficiently kind of into something, I check my phone as if I'm trying to solve a murder. You know, right? I'm constantly going over to it, but it's the little things, you know. I mean, the pandemic combined with having 2 under 2, as they say, has really, like you just look for those little moments of peace. So yeah, that's my little escape for now.
Right. Yeah. We had, I recently segued over to the New York Times. I had been on the old URL, so I had my 31 game streak was intact, and I switched over yesterday, and that goes straight down to 0. Got to start all over again. I know, it was heartbreaking, man.
It's like Cal Ripken, man. That's not fair that you 31 games in a row. Yeah. There's got to be some way to keep that on the record.
Well,
New York Times, you should have that technology. Come on.
Yeah.
It just reset mine, by the way. I finished mine this morning, and it was like, 1 in a row. I was like, 1 in a row.
What?
Yeah, again.
I think that's a bone job.
Yeah, I think the most I've gotten in a row is like 3 at this point, ever since they switched over.
Well, have
you guys dabbled at all in like the ones that you can play just one after another?
My wife does.
There's one called Word Us that I came across right when the game first came out, because I was like, 1 a day is not enough, and plus keeps your skills sharp, so you can knock out that 1 a day thing. But I haven't. Go ahead.
I said to my wife too that this is perfect for us because it's really like a 6th grade level. It's like I feel like I'm a genius, but it's like 5 letters, okay, you know, it's like 6th grade level words. Yeah, and you feel great about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And now they have geography ones and curse words, and I don't know if this guy. I highly doubt he's got a hand in any of that other stuff that created this, but it's being parodied left and right now. It's a moneymaker.
I bet you in short order. Now he made a deal, obviously, and we heard it was what was it in the 6 figures or above?
It was the low 7 figures.
Yeah, I mean believe. For Wordle, Jesus Christ! But at some point, I'm sure he'll get boned out of something. I think he made the deal very quickly too. He didn't sit on it long enough.
Yeah. Well, you know, my time over at the Institute, my first guess is always Wuhan, and that doesn't, you know, it's not the best word to start with, but it depends on the day.
It's just, but when you get it, you feel so accomplished.
Do you actually have a pretty steady starting word, or do you switch every time?
No, I'm too scattered to. Yeah, I just go. I'm a field player. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a. You know, my brother is in like statistics and analysis and stuff. He's like, you got to start with like crate or stoic or something. I'm like, no, man, I go with like, stamp or, one day and then like humor the next or whatever. I don't have a predetermined word. You got to live, man. You got to live.
Yeah. The only choice I'll go is am I feeling it? It's an EA word or an OU word. And I'll go with either gut on that. And that's the only system I pretty much use at this point.
You know, the thing that really trips you up is when there's a pronunciation that you're not, your brain is missing, right?
There was one the other day.
Yeah.
What was the one you guys were talking? You both were 2 different words were correct for the Wordle.
Well, it was agora and aroma. And that was because of the 2 different servers, and I was on the old ones.
But you might look at like aroma and you go like, what is aroma? What is aroma? Aroma? No, that's not a word.
Yeah. Sometimes you feel like a fool. You're like, a C can also be pronounced like an S.
Right. The best is Kathy's story. Kathy was playing. Let's tell about playing Scrabble.
I mean, this was
true story.
Well before any of this, and I was playing Scrabble, and they laid out the word, and I was like sounding it out as he was laying it out. It was ORA. A. So I was like, oh, range. Oh, range. I'm like, that's not even a word. He's like, orange? Yes, it is.
But your mind doesn't process that way all the time. And so you're like, okay, this is part of the deal.
You're like, app play? No, it's Apple.
That's what that is. Hey, Ted, I wanted to ask about a photo on your Instagram account. Nick just pulled this up, but it's you and Roger Waters together.
Oh, man.
That's pretty incredible.
What a night. Yeah, that was insane, man. There was a gig. I've only been into New York 3 times. My wife and I moved with the babies up to Connecticut in the last year or so. And so I haven't been back to the city except for 3 times. One was I played Radio City with Jim Gaffigan, who I opened for the last 6 years. The second was Todd Barry's 34th anniversary show.
Cool.
And the third was Roger Waters was doing this gig. Lee Camp is a great comedian who was doing this benefit to get the word out and to raise funds for Julian Assange. So he's like, do you want to do this gig? I was like, yeah, sure. And at the time, Roger Waters was not on it. It was just like a fundraiser, whatever, kind of a political thing. I'm like, sure, I'll do that. And then the day of, as I'm driving in, he tells me Roger Waters and Cornel West have been added to the gig. And I'm like, damn, Roger Waters, Cornel West. So
that's a pairing.
Yeah. So, and I'm like, am I, are they going to be there? Is it going to be a Zoom thing? Like, what's the deal? Sure enough, when I get to the theater, they're there. And Roger Waters is trying to post the link to the live stream to his phone. And he's like, I don't know how to do Twitter. Anyone know how to do it? I'm like, I know how to do I jumped on his phone,
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's like, I don't know. They want me to do the live stream link. So I do it. But what I did was I retweeted him from my account so that people would see
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Did you get any?
I also did his, just to make it legit. I also did it from his.
Did you get any really good chat time with him, or was it more you were servicing the gig?
Well, again, that was my thing was like, is this going to be like he does the gig and runs?
Right.
But what was funny was it was supposed to be me, then Cornel West, then Roger Waters at the end.
Yeah.
But then they say to me, hey, Ted, there's going to be a switch. It's going to be Roger Waters, Cornel West, and then you're headlining. I'm like, oh, great. I'm following Roger Waters and Cornel West. I'm like, I'm there just to help. Sure, whatever you guys need. So, and I'm also thinking they're going to duck out, to your question.
Sure.
I'm thinking they're going to leave after their set. They stay. It's a small theater. The two of them sit at a table in the front row. They're sitting like 10 feet away from me. And it was great because they're laughing the whole time. And I told a story about how I had been at Occupy Wall Street and Roger Waters came. I'm sorry, Cornel West walked up and I was holding a sign. And the sign said, if only the war on poverty were a real war, then we'd actually be putting money into it. So I'm holding this sign.
Right. And
Cornel West comes up to me and I was like, would you like to hold my sign? And he's, and by the way, I should say it was on a pizza box. So I said, would you like to hold my sign? And he said, you've tried the rest, now try the best. I said, no, flip it around. It's on the other side. Yeah. It's on the other side. So I got to tell him that story at the gig on stage, man. So it was like this full circle moment, and then on top of it, we all went out for drinks after. So I'm having drinks with Roger Waters at a small bar. It's the pandemic, so not many people are there. We're at a table, and you guys, how it is, where they're talking to me about like Roger Waters is saying, like, I can't believe what you guys do. Yeah. I'm like, you can't believe what I do. I'm like, you don't even know about my work in virology. I mean,
astonishing.
It was insane, man.
In that company, do you find a way to ask about, the songs that that he wrote, or is it in a?
You talk about Cornel West? No.
Obviously, I'm blown away by Roger Waters.
Yeah,
but I mean, do you ask those questions, or this guy's heard it enough? I'm not gonna,
he played a song on the piano. He debuted it, so it was the first time he ever played that song live in person, and also he said the first time he ever played piano. So, but he started with a joke, because it was a comedy show.
Yeah.
So. So I kind of I ribbed him about the joke that he told.
Right.
But then I said, like that was really awesome that you've never played piano in person before. And I said, I'm kind of shocked that you never did that. He's like, yeah, I'm just kind of, he's self-deprecating, calling himself a one-trick pony. He's like, I play the guitar and I sing. So it was that really amazing thing that often happens when you're a comedian and you meet these people. They are more impressed by what you do,
right.
So that it was kind of that vibe, but I didn't ask him too much because, you didn't want to fanboy out.
Yeah.
And he was, like I said, he was more intrigued and they really wanted to ask all the comedians questions.
We've always said that you run the risk when you meet people like that or people that you've enjoyed all your life. And it's almost, I find now in this job, we get to meet a lot of people. So it's not, there's not that, it's not the way it used to be where I'd be like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. It's your job. You're going to meet them. You're going to converse with them. But there are still some people that sit in that zone like, I don't know if I want to meet this person because God forbid I find out they're a raging a-hole. And it's going to sully everything I think about them from here on in. But you had, not only did you get that moment, but you had an intimate sort of conversation, which is amazing. And the piano is your instrument, right?
That's right. I studied jazz piano in college. So, I actually, it's funny you bring that up. I considered, because I followed him, so I considered on the show sitting down to the piano and playing, but I'm like, I don't want to make him look, I don't want to make like I'm trying to show up Roger Waters.
Well, you could have said, I blew Waters off the stage with my musicianship.
Yes.
But I will say, I'm obviously a fan of music. I work in radio, but I'm also a huge fan of comedy and what you guys are able to do. Not just creating these jokes out of thin air, but to be able to command an audience by just standing on a stage with a microphone is, to me, like, I don't know how you guys do it. And I've always wanted to try it. Like, it was, my parents would, at parties, be like, hey, Case, come in here. Tell everybody what you want to be when you grow up. I want to be a stand-up comedian. Because it's it's ridiculous. But I've always loved it. And the fact that you guys are able to do that, I just... and I've been watching you guys for my entire life, and I still don't know how you guys are able to do it.
No, it is a bit of a mystery. It's funny you bring up about your own childhood because I would tell my mom that I wanted to be a clown. I never got to achieve that, but I'm sort of in the area.
She wanted you to go into biology.
Yeah. So eventually I made her happy. But I do think that, to answer your question, the way that you get there is all the gigs that we were talking about beforehand. I never get to share a stage with Roger Waters or Cornel West or Chuck Berry if I don't do the gig at the Ground Round, if I don't do the gig at the bar, that's how you get there.
We were just talking about the gigs, and I did a fair share of Ground Rounds, and so I'm like a canker sore on the volume of your career, but there are those moments when you are in that moment, and that's what I'm sure feeds you, Ted, is that when you have a couple thousand people hanging on your every word on a stage, and really dialed in. It's such a communication and such a connection that I don't know what can rival it. Now I get to do that every morning here, in a much larger capacity, but there is that uniqueness. It's amazing.
There is something very beautiful about it, in a room full of people, especially the big venues. I'm doing like NBA arenas when I open for Jim Gaffigan.
Wow.
So, we're in the round, like with 15,000 people. So it's so special and bizarre, and kind of sometimes you have to pinch yourself because you also remember the gigs where you were in front
the Ground Round.
In front of I'm talking like two people,
waiting on their popcorn.
Table. Yeah, two different tables. So and the thing you also learn is not to do another gig after a special gig, because when I did Radio City with Jim,
amazing,
a comedian called me and said, hey, you're going to be in the city, you want to do a gig the same night? I'm like, I'm not doing a bar gig after Radio City. There's no way that I'm going to go from that high. I'm going to let that high last for at least 24 hours.
You know what? I love getting insight from comedians when you guys talk to one another in podcasts, and it's really interesting to see how you guys are able to dissect your art form. And Mark Normand, I think, is a really, really great source for that stuff, and he said something. Great, he is. But he said something really interesting in a podcast that I was listening to when he talks about bombing and he doesn't look at it like bombing. You know, the way he looks at bombing is he's just gathering information. And I thought, man, that is such a positive way to look at, you know, what you guys do. And he's like, no, man. He's like, you know, if a joke doesn't land or it doesn't go, he goes, you know, I need to learn from that, and I'm gathering information. And, you know, just the way that you guys are able to do that, you know, like just to go, okay, all right, this
to go for it.
Yeah.
Well, I was reading.
It's not that detached, though. Just to answer, it's not. It's in the experience. It's not like, okay, let me gather that data. It sucks. It sucks when you're bombing. You know, after the fact, is when the data collection begins. Yeah.
Well,
in the moment, it sucks.
To Casey's point, I was reading an interview with you, and you were talking about how you try out material, and you don't, like, for example, I know a lot of comedians will have their go-to, you know, sounding board. They're a comedian who can I bounce this off you? But you're a fan of, okay, bring it up on the stage and let's work it here, because this is ultimately where it's going to end up anyway. I might as well get started. Is that, would you say that's a fair assessment?
Absolutely, because a crowd is a different organism. It's not one-on-one. It's not your wife, your buddy, your friend, like, hey, can I run this by you? Because even if they laugh, it ultimately doesn't matter, you know, because when you get it in front of a crowd, that's when you have to test it. So, you know, I'm not going to waste my time or my friends or my wife's time. You know, it has to go in front of a crowd.
Right.
So I like to not only do it cold, but sometimes I like to put it in the front of my set. So I haven't won the crowd over yet, you know, like with like 10 minutes of stuff that I know works. I like to put it right up front to challenge myself. Like, all right, let's see if this really works cold when they haven't seen me yet. I haven't said anything. Let's really judge the material and give it a chance to see if it works.
That's cool.
Ted, another comedian that we're friendly with, and I know you're friendly with as well, is Mike Birbiglia, and you've done his show. And
Mike.
He's great, and I love his observational humor and how he approaches the studying of the comedy as well. But I always like hearing from comedians who they have discovered recently. So is there somebody that's been opening for you that you love, or somebody that's new, that's up and coming that we might not know about, or you know, along those lines?
Well, you know, I would say not somebody new, but it's funny enough, a guy from the Philly area who I've long been a fan of, who is, you know, probably 10, 15 years behind me, is Jim Tews. Jim Tews is a great comedian. I think he's out of the Allentown area in his beginnings, but just a funny, smart, kind of sneaks up on you. And I've worked with him many times over the years. He's probably in his mid to late 30s, but another guy that I just love to watch work because he's got his own style. You know,
it's
like
so
you were
cool.
saying.
Here, the comedy clubs will have their comedy competitions, and you know, Helium does one that I'm always a judge on, and there are so many talented, I mean, really thoughtful, funny, you know, comedians in this area that are creating, you know, unique characters. It's always a hard thing for a comedian to pick, well, what am I going to be on stage? And there's just a ton of talent, and it's so cool to see that. And you've been around so long. Have you ever had a comedian come up to you and say you were an inspiration to me and what I do?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I've been around long enough now, 30 years, that does happen, where comedians tell me, like, I saw your Comedy Central special when I was in grade school or middle school, you know, and now they're like 40. No, not that old. Not that old, but you know, it does make me feel both proud and old. But I love to teach and I love to talk comedy. Now would be a good time to plug. I do a comedy class on my Patreon, patreon.com/Ted Alexandro, where I've posted 20 classes talking about comedy, talking about the things you were talking about, finding your voice, exploring who you are on stage. So yeah, I like to talk about all those things, and it takes time, you know. So everyone's different, but the advantage these kids have now, there was no YouTube when I started in '92. You know, so like I remember going to the Museum of Television and Radio in New York City, and it was basically YouTube. It was like going into a building where you could say, like, can I see Richard Pryor's first set on the Tonight Show? Can I see, you know, this tape from Steve Allen's show or whatever? And you would watch, and that you could only get 2 at a time, I think. And you would watch it, and I would take notes, study. But now the benefit that these kids have is, you know, at their fingertips, the history of comedy. So it's great. And I think it's to the benefit of comedy because kids are a lot more savvy and a lot more knowledgeable.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, tonight and tomorrow night, it will be evenings of comedy and virology with Ted Alexandro.
A little dentistry, maybe?
Maybe a little dentistry thrown in. We'll see.
We'll see.
That's Teddy Novocaine, right?
Teddy Novocaine. Yes, please follow all 3 of my Instagram channels. But I have to leave you with a joke because I think you said it was National Wine Day.
It is.
Yes.
And coffee and wine are like my life coaches. Coffee's there for a pat on the ass, like, go get them, we can do this. And then wine's like, you'll get them next time. You gave it a good shot. Keep your chin up. I'm like, thanks, wine. You're the only one who gets me.
I love it. HeliumComedy.com. Get your tickets for Ted Alexandro. Thanks, Ted. It's great to see you, man.
Thank you, guys. Pleasure.
Ted Alexandro.
Really good.
He's one of the best.
Yes.
One of the best. I love it.